Kartik in here is the co-founder, co-owner, and the face of Satsearch, and you guys will find very interesting a couple of words that they have in their website. They are supporting the industry to source better. And then you also need to look into their mission and the fact that they are highly diverse, integrative, and collaboration as a gift. Kartik also has things on GitHub, so things that you can use and so think about this. Kartik is the person that is giving you tools to reuse knowledge, putting his own flavor and making people come together. But before all of that, Kartik, come here. Welcome. This is a teaser for the podcast that we'll be doing.
Thank you very much.
I would like to welcome and ask you, how did you move from being a Mars analog, pretty pictures over there, really, like you're going to be the next Martian, to Satsearch? Come on, give us a bit more.
Yeah, these kinds of journeys are never linear. It's kind of the story of life. You turn left, you turn right. I think in my case, it's always been a case of trying to jump on opportunities. So I've had a deep interest in all things space, from a young age. But even when I went to university, actually, I didn't intend specifically to study space. I actually thought I would end up working in Formula One, which was my real passion.
Okay.
And then, I came across a professor who really inspired me. It sort of raised this deep curiosity that I'd had as a child as well about space. So then I ended up going in that direction with my education as well, kind of specialization in my master's and in my PhD. And one of the things I learned, especially during the second half of my master's, was that you only really get to know yourself when you start putting yourself in a position in which you test yourself, right? So the way I did this was by taking opportunities to travel, to do internships, to get engaged in projects in citizen science, not-for-profit, along with academic work.
Yep.
So, I ended up in this Mars analog mission for the same reason. It was serendipity. I met somebody at an event in Stockholm that triggered me, and then before I knew it, I was in the middle of the desert in Oman on this mission. And then similarly, Satsearch came out of a bit of serendipity, but in that case, also a bit of an understanding of frustration in my life that I couldn't understand why that problem existed, particularly because my background is in space systems engineering and astrodynamics. So through my master's and my PhD, and then when I worked in industry, I worked on design projects. And as much as I was doing really interesting simulation work, modeling work, complicated stuff, complicated maths and physics, I was doing this really basic thing of Googling, for components and parts and calling suppliers and not getting a reply. So at that point, I had already dipped my toes in open source software development, the idea of, collaborative work. And then it just felt like completely out of place, that in an industry in which there's so much high-tech stuff being done, literal frontier technology, that as a highly trained engineer, I was effectively Googling for hours a day. So that kind of sparked my thought that I know how to build stuff, I know how to write code, I know how to work with other people. And just that little bit of a rebellious streak in me to kind of wonder, okay, is it really true that the way that we work today is the only way of working? And so not being willing to accept that, I think, put me on this path to say, okay, I cannot believe that, when we have a lunar base and people living on Mars, that the way we will get there is by people Googling for stuff all day. And that just put me on this process. I had no idea that we would be building this marketplace that we're building. It was just simply an acknowledgement of, that's like a really weird thing in my life that I'm doing this. And as we spoke to other people, we realized other people were doing it. And it's often these things happen incrementally. Like, it doesn't happen all of a sudden.
Okay.
And so that's how it happened. It was a little bit about keeping my eyes open, acknowledging things, opportunities around me, frustrations in my life. And, the nexus of all of that brought me to doing Satsearch, just like it did with the Mars analog missions. It's just kind of grab the opportunity and it's there.
So I was here modeling the process. I like Googling, checking parts, calling suppliers, not getting response, and we even talked about, is the part arriving? We haven't talked about that. We haven't talked about, is this the real part? Can I have the data schemas? Can I have, man, do I agree in the payment terms, or can I bring the parts from my country to yours, or do I have ITAR requirements, or do I have other? In a brief, how much better is it today with Satsearch? Because this looks like crazy. Sorry, let me put this two ways. Do you still think there are people doing Googling, part check, calling suppliers, not getting answers, getting answers? Do you think this still exists, or how are things?
Yeah. So actually, my belief is even stronger, and my conviction that is happening is even stronger now. The more embedded we are inside the ecosystem, and the more people are using Satsearch. So although we have a lot of people using our website, both on the buy side and the sell side, and the platform is growing, we are really only getting started. There are so many challenges to address, and you mentioned a number of them. And I think that is what excites me, because it is an opportunity. It is an opportunity to solve what is maybe not the most inspiring problem to solve, right? So people who come into the space industry are thinking rockets and satellites and going to Mars. They're not thinking data schemas and ontologies and
Yes.
ERP and
Yeah.
But the deeper we've gotten into this, the more I've gotten excited about that, because I can see it as being a fundamental layer, like part of the fabric of what has to be in place if we want to achieve all those dreams. And I think somewhere it inspires me, because it means then that I can have real impact doing something that most people in the world probably consider boring, collecting, curating, structuring data, making it available. I don't know, for at least most people that I speak to who come into the space industry, that is not the reason they're joining the industry. They're joining it because of visions of going to space, or, landing on Mars. And I think we have now understood very deeply that what we are doing is both necessary and sufficient. Well, sufficient, I guess not. So there's many moving parts to this, but definitely necessary to achieve all of those ambitions. And that inspires me every day. It means that every email I spend, every minute I do something to improve our platform, in some indirect way, we're helping us as an industry and humanity generally kind of to reach into the stars. And we're just doing it in a very unseen way, maybe, doing all of this kind of deeper fundamental stuff in the industry. And I think, if you ask me, people are really still doing this every single day. We have a long way to go with Satsearch to really say we've solved the problem. But I think what excites me is that we've started to solve it, and we can start to see the results of that.
To excite the folks for our next interview podcast, do you see Satsearch becoming something different? Or do you want to, as I was listening to you, and you become this, I'm going to call it technology transfer or broker of knowledge between parts, but how much deep or wide do you want to go? You see what I mean? How much deep would be selecting this industry, or you say, I got it. I see human space flight. I see hatches. I see rescue. Where do you think? Is it Leo, Geo? Is it Kartik? for people to have an idea where you want to dream at? Because your dreams seem to be higher. That is.
Yeah, you know what? I actually think, and we take a very strong position, we don't want to be determining the future. We want to be able to enable people to build it, right? So that's why, as a marketplace, we take this also very neutral position. You know, our goal is to make it easy for people to find, engineers to find parts, components, systems, services, because I'm convinced that if we make that easier, all of these super smart people in the world, they will come up with ideas we haven't even dreamt of, right? So I see us as kind of like an enabler. So I don't want to be determining what that future looks like. I want to be enabling it. And then I'm convinced that there are more than enough smart people in the world who are going to take that opportunity to do everything from, you know, building an industry for space tourism to solving problems here on Earth, using Earth observation data and navigation systems to deep space settlement. And in fact, I think what is really interesting is the deeper you go into this, the more you see how deeply embedded space is already in society today. And that makes it exciting to me because that means that in some sense, you can think of every company in the future being in one way or another a space company. If you're using, for instance, global navigation systems, if you've got a GPS receiver in your phone, for instance, you could argue that cell phone companies are part space company, right? Because they are dependent on space technology.
Yes.
So then you start really talking about space being interwoven into global GDP. You know, it's not this separate thing, the separate industry. And that really excites me because then you're talking about job creation and industry creation and innovation and problem solving. And if we are an enabling factor in that, then I think that I will be very proud to look back and say, look, we contributed in one way or another towards that goal. And then, as I said, I'm convinced there are so many smart people in the world. If we can just enable them, they will do, you know, all kinds of incredible things.
So that's why this is called Space Village, okay? Or we are all space villagers. And Kartik, thank you for this teaser. We will be doing the podcast version of this. Thank you very much for this. I'll be posting that on our LinkedIn and sharing this with the folks. I'll check what type of questions, but thank you very, very much for this.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for inviting me, and I look forward to the full discussion.